Yes, and we're going to turn our attention even further down at the table to look at the unfortunate campaign of Scotland. Yes, bottom half now indeed. They finished fourth in the end. Not a happy campaign for the Scots. Opening with
they finished with total, was it?
That's right. Yep. Yeah. Just the 2 wins, obviously England and Italy.
So yes, some silverware, Calcutta Cup, but as was the case last year, that's a long time ago now, and it's not fresh in the memory at all. And I'm closer to bitter disappointment than jubilant joy as they come at the tail end of a season that they really did fancy having a crack at in terms of this tournament campaign. It was it was disappointing. They're, as I was highlighting in earlier on, ill discipline is the one that I keep coming back to. So you keep trying to analyse Scotland from all these things, and like on paper, looking at the nuts and bolts of their team, like there's always a lot is made of the depth. And yes, they do only have 2 clubs to mine from, so depth is a perpetual concern for them. But like, not just the first choice players, but like the second and third choice guys, they do have good depth in lots of positions right now. So it's a different matter that's seeing them come unstuck. It's a top 2 inches thing, and it goes to, like, they gave away 61 penalties in the tournament, the most of the whole of any team. That's one aspect of their ill discipline, but also things like Hogg not sticking that last pass in that last game, things like the bad boy element of it, the kind of guys being caught going out, kind of flaunting COVID restrictions at the time, I think, to go out on a night out and getting caught, and then having a whole week and a whole match day.
I'm not sure if there were any specific restrictions.
No, there was a team restriction to stop them from going out. They can still have drinks and stuff in the hotel or whatever, but going out as they did, and then it ended up fueling the fire of all that. You end up with the media on your backs as a result of it, and it heaps on pressure, and they haven't really coped well with the pressure that they heaped on themselves. To be honest, and to be very frank, it's a backward step rather than a forward one, to be honest, compared to where they were last year.
Yeah, no question. It's hard to argue with any of that, and yet they've shown capacity to defend very well. Yeah. They've shown capacity to attack very well. Yeah. They've shown capacity to kick extremely well. They kick their way down the field.
Yep. Hog spiral, top quality.
Their set piece can be competitive. Like they have weaknesses like any team. They're not the best scrum out there. They're not the most physical tight 5 out there. That can get them unstuck. They can be beaten in a power game. True. As happened against the Springboks. But you're right in saying that they should be a team that's competing for trophies in terms of what we know they can do. Yeah. But it's intermittent. It comes and goes. They fall asleep in big moments and allow them to pass them by.
They do. Then like even talking with Hoggy's chat there afterwards, as I was highlighting, where he's talking like, oh, you've zeroed in on, like he's kind of bitterly going like, oh, you zeroed in on 5 seconds, that was an error, and it's like that doesn't matter. It's the whole 80 minutes that matters. But it's like for this team, they really need to take a look at those 5-second moments that see them unstuck in game after game after game, because that's what it's about. Like decisive moments are a thing.
Chris Harris pass against France,
another classic example of like what might have been. But what doesn't follow is like not just does that moment not stick, but then the compounding of it with error after error, both errors of judgment and of execution that follow, and see them get results like that France game where they were really put to the sword in that instance. And then the Ireland game, it was a bit less brutal, but it was no less kind of already over before it had even started in many ways, and it looked like there was arm's length distance between them and that team. And looking on paper, you feel why, and certainly from their chat, from where they want to be, as Hogg often cites, it's like not what we're about or not what we want to be about, but it's like it's becoming what they're about, is coming unstuck in key moments and being quite a bit behind.
Being beatable. By the end of this tournament, that game against Ireland, they were laughably non-competitive. They just should never be that non-competitive. Yeah. They're not that bad a team, and I mean, Ireland didn't play particularly well. Scotland defended really well, and yet it didn't matter because they didn't do anything with the ball. They made mistake after mistake after mistake, and Ireland were allowed to just ease their way to victory, which shouldn't happen. And this team needs to have some soul searching. They might need to go on a retreat somewhere and really talk to themselves. I mean, the leadership group, the question is, how badly do they want it? Because sometimes Finn Russell, who's one of my favourite players to watch, who reads the game brilliantly, who came on in the game again in Dublin where he was dropped and showed that he is a really top class player, even above who the other options are. Even though Kinghorn did all right, but he was just much better. He what he can bring that team.
But even knowing what he can bring, he was below his own par this time.
They need him to be like. Often he has this kind of laid back attitude of like, hey, listen, this is me, and I'm actually pretty damn good, and this is I break the mold in that way. I'm a maverick. I'm not that disciplined necessarily, but the reality is that if their top players rock up to the World Cup with that, or even another Six Nations, I mean, the point is it's passing them by. If they rock up in that kind of shape to a major competition, they're not going to win it. They're ultimately going to come unstuck against one of these other magnificent teams. And that's a consistent thing now. And so heading into next year, obviously you're looking at the World Cup and you're looking at the Six Nations as another chance for Scotland to get silverware before this team and Townsend and potentially Russell and Hogg move on. They need to do some soul searching. They need to get together, decide who they want to be, and become a more disciplined, cohesive unit. Because I do think that they have the quality. I think when this Scotland team works, when it's firing on all cylinders, it is excellent to watch.
True.
They have a brilliant defence. They also have a uniquely excellent offence. They have all the tools to do it still. In Doohan and Darcy Graham, they have as exciting a pair of wingers as anybody.
And in Schoeman and Nell and the likes, they have some useful scrummagers to lock down a set piece and strike off it. Their set piece moves off scrum are better than anyone's at the minute as far as their designs and the Gregor Townsend ones, but it's like it's just putting it all together with that top level of concentration and desire that we just haven't really felt.
And
like it felt like it was scuppered on week 2. It's just too often that's the case. Like we were citing that stat that it was like 1996 the last time they won their opening 2 games of the Six Nations. And it was the 5 Nations at the time. They've never done it in the 6, and it's like that's a long time to go without that bit of momentum. And it just means that once again, come that final weekend, they had something to play for in that it was Dublin. They're going to have Ireland in the World Cup pool. It is a monkey on their backs. They need to perform against Ireland. That is one of the missions for this team in advance of the World Cup, is get a good showing in against Ireland at the very least, if not a win ideally. But they allowed that to pass them by, and it's partly because like Ireland were there playing for a Triple Crown and putting themselves in the lead in the mix for the competition on the last weekend. Scotland, 2 weekends out from the final weekend, they knew that they weren't going to be in the mix of the business end, and it's an all too irritatingly familiar picture for this very, very talented group of Scottish players, like as talented as they've had in the entire professional era.
Ali Price in the form of his life, he's been fabulous.
And actually, no slide on him. I thought he was a rock of performance, of consistency, more so than Russell and Hogg, who had errors and had patches of kind of looking a bit dialed out, to be honest, whereas Ali Price did set a nice tempo throughout. I don't think that was where the problem lay at all. But and also credit to Hamish Watson, who managed to get through his 4th consecutive Six Nations without missing a single tackle. That's phenomenal stats from the Mish, but it's like the difference in workload that the guys in the back row on their defensive end get through versus sometimes the kind of laconic look of the backs who are just kind of flapping around and then ultimately turfing the crucial passes.
Harris defends very well. I mean, their defense is okay. Their offense, both their defense and offense can be great, but they need to be dialed into the fact that it takes a lot to win a tournament, a lot more than they're giving at the moment. They have to be consistently innovative as well. Like there were times in that French game, obviously tough defense to break down, but some of the patterns they were running, they ran 2 or 3 years ago.
Probably guilty. I think it was a point Rob Kearney was making, but they're guilty of a little adrenaline dump mid-game sometimes, where you see them overexcitedly cheering like a penalty that they just won at the breakdown, and then they'll cough it up by throwing the ensuing line out crooked or something, and it's like too much of that, getting too geared up over the wrong moments. Yeah, and just even like some of the patterns that they run on offense, they need to change up on their multi-phase. Like I remember watching them against France, and you had Finn throwing his no-look ball, and France obviously just had it red. They've done their homework. No one's buying that anymore. Fiku opposite him.
Exactly.
That no-look ball to him week in, week out.
Exactly. It's tough to run an offense that again, any kind of offense on a multi-phase against the French defense. But it has to be a little bit different from what it was a couple of years ago. You have to be consistently innovative to stay on top in this game, or to even get to the top in this game.
That's true.
And that involves putting in a lot of work, staying humble, staying focused, being determined, and actually backing up the words that you say. And I think at the moment,
guilty of falling short on all counts. I think
they are. It's been tough. I didn't want it to go this way for Scotland to go back down. I thought they were right last year, just right in the mix with all of the top 5 teams. Now they've taken a step down.
We were asking the question of them is like, will they kick on and manage to grab silverware, perhaps a Triple Crown, yada yada yada. no was the emphatic answer to that. It was not. It's very tough to spin this as progress in any regard, because it's another year older for a lot of these key men. It remains to be seen.
The question now is whether it's fatal or not. Whether this team that is incredibly talented can get back, dust themselves down, go back to their roots, meet up, rally, and then come back with a much better level of performance, because they have the talent to do that.
They do.
They also have the brain power. They have
the time frame to get it right. We've seen with the Rassie Erasmus thing, like it's around that time away from World Cup now where you can kind of start getting things going. Like it's probably a little late in the game, but it is like there's time to turn all of this around. It's not it involves, necessarily fatal, but their reaction to it is what will determine whether it is or not.
It involves Hogg and Russell and the leadership group and Gregor Townsend setting, because I don't think there's any case for replacing Gregor Townsend. I think he's a very smart coach. I think he has the brain power to get it done. But just setting aside their differences, their bullshit, their egos, and coming together with common cause to try and do something in 2023. And I think it could go one of two ways. I mean, they could if they continue down the path that they're currently on, they'll come to the Six Nations, and despite all their talent, they won't be as cohesive or as physical or as able to deal with the high level of rugby as some of the other teams, and they'll ship defeats to England and defeats to Ireland and defeats to France, and then
possibly defeats to Wales again as well.
Some mixture of them, multiple defeats, maybe possibly with one or two wins along the way. In those games, but they'll rock up to the World Cup firmly out of favour, lose to Ireland, lose to South Africa, and then go home. And obviously that's the worst case scenario. That's what they're on track to do at the moment, and they have to turn that around, and they have the talent to turn it around. Obviously from a selfish point of view, we kind of hope they don't, but I know
it's true, and it is the ever frustration of the Scottish fans, because you kind of know there's more in the team than what they're providing on the pitch. And the same errors just keep repeating, so it is a touch of deja vu all over again with it, and like things like that Hoggy pass, like we've seen that carbon copy on that very ground in years gone by. So it's top 2 inches thing that needs addressing. They do need to take a firm look at themselves and try and right their ship and advance.
I would include Johnny Gray in that leadership group as well. I mean, his level of performance.
My question is is Hogg the best idea for captain for them? Maybe someone like Hamish Watson, just give him the badge.
I'm not sure how much of a communicator he is. Johnny Gray has captained before. He drives me crazy as well. As before, he has brilliant performances and then shocking performances. It's like Johnny. He's an absolute
hot and cold.
It's totally hot and cold player. But you're looking at
frustrated Scotland,
frustrating to talk about,
a frustratingly familiar conversation that we have to have about Scotland. We do have to have it, but with that we will move on to
Thanks for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, please be sure to like and subscribe, and hey, if you have an opinion of your own, if you disagree with what we're saying, leave a comment down below. We might just get back to you.